Meanwhile, over 100 South Africans living in China are expected to arrive home in the early hours of Saturday morning. The SANDF and several departments are poised to receive the 121 citizens. After their arrival, the group will be extensively screened at the airport and quarantined in Limpopo for 14 to 21 days. For the latest now from Polokwane, we're across live to our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena. A very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Just as a start, of course, we heard just now in our previous clip, the health minister announcing there that, we went from 24 confirmed cases, 8 more than, we now are sitting at 24, confirmed cases, 8 more than yesterday. Do we have any sort of further updates from Limpopo at this point? I know that the minister had said, this is the last day that you will be able to be in that ranch and then it becomes a quarantined area. But what more information do you have for us coming from Limpopo?
Well, of course, the minister making an announcement in terms of numbers, but also sending a warning that we must expect numbers to go up. And of course, we will get that information tomorrow, but also touching on what is going to happen here at the ranch and clearly indicating that now this is a military zone. And perhaps today before 6 o'clock, this will be our last chance to look at the ranch and perhaps make sense of what will be happening here. We know that these South Africans, these fellow compatriots will arrive tomorrow morning and then they will be taken here. And it is going to be a very tight, monitored, secured movement of these South Africans to displace. People will not be able to interact with them. And this is part of the process to ensure that we don't take any chances as a country, even though we were told that indeed all of them, they are well and none of them has tested positive. And therefore, I think it's a precautionary measure. You know that when coming to pandemics, you follow the rules of the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization is very strict. You have to ensure that you do the basics, that is making sure that you implement the quarantine. It can either be self-isolation or the one that is being done by the health sector based on the case. And because these are a group of people who are flying out of what we call an epicenter of the virus, even though it has kind of gone down and a bit of movement. Some hospitals that were specifically built to accommodate those who were affected or who were infected now are empty. But the minister saying that they will continue to do what needs to be done in terms of the health protocol and health policies. We know that earlier on we had from some of them, when they're leaving the universities, they were going to the airport in Wuhan, and they were clearly again surrounded by people who have expertise to ensure that on their way to the airport, health protocols are followed. When they arrive at the airport at Wuhan, again, and protocols of health will be followed, this time around done by the Chinese, but again, before they get into that plane, the South African side, those who have been given responsibility to ensure that we don't import this virus via this group, proper protocol are followed. And we know that in that plane you have people with experience, we have the medical team. The Defense Force has got a special unit that deals with issues of health, particularly when soldiers are sick or when they are injured or when they are deployed in dangerous situations where you have the pandemic. And therefore we are expecting them to arrive tomorrow morning.
All right, Sophie, 2 issues specifically pertaining to Limpopo. The first being that, if you looked at social media yesterday and some of today, of course, there were a lot of people who live in Limpopo who were quite upset about the fact that we're having South Africans coming from Wuhan who will then arrive in their province in Limpopo, and they were questioning why, Limpopo was chosen when nothing else, is brought to Limpopo. In terms of what was said on social media, do you find that those sentiments are somewhat shared on the ground as you are in Limpopo at the moment? Or is that really just Twitter talk and Twitter banter? Or do people in Limpopo really feel that, as was said on social media, Limpopo isn't a dumping ground, as they put it? The other question goes about the issue of the Easter holidays. We know that, the pilgrimages are going to be happening. The religious trips are happening, and a lot of them happen in Limpopo. There was concern about the fact that, there'd be crowds and people very close in proximity to each other in Limpopo. What are some of the concerns being shared around the religious activities and what's about to take place as we head into those Easter holidays?
Well, let's start with the view from the citizens of this province. You know that when there are big stories, people interpret information in different ways. Of course, perhaps they are justified in terms of having fears because that assists in ensuring that people are careful. But also you have a situation where you have leaders. The sad thing is leaders, instead of allaying fears, working with the Department of Health, working with everyone here to try and manage this situation, they are actually at times using this as a political football, because we have to call it as it is. The divisions in political parties sometimes leads to situations like that, because the citizens have justified concerns, and then you find a person all of a sudden becoming a volunteer, leading that view or the feeling on the ground. But the sad thing is that these are the very same people who are part of the ruling party, the very ruling party that is charged with the responsibility to ensure that through its different departments, as prescribed in the Constitution of the Republic, in times of war, in times of pandemic, they do what needs to be done to evacuate the citizens of that country. They are the very same people who are leading the charge and kind of almost influencing ordinary people on the ground. But it speaks to the kind of leadership at times we have in this country, where people seek to be populist. But it is indeed a concern to ordinary people in Limpopo, and I think what needs to be done is government to be upfront, avail people, avail leaders, avail experts in all platforms, different media houses, using broadcasting, different broadcasters to communicate this message. It is for that reason yesterday the Minister of Health also visited the leadership of ZCC. You know, the two institutions, they have a big following, and therefore Easter holidays, many people will be making their way here. And not only people from South Africa, they do have a strong following outside the borders of South Africa. Therefore, it is indeed a bit of a tricky one for South Africa, and the minister raising an issue that indeed they are worried, not only around ZCC, but generally Easter holidays. We know all the religious groupings, they have gatherings and you have large numbers. You don't know who's going to be there. It is for that reason the president next week will be meeting with the South African Council of Churches to discuss this issue. But because South Africa is a democratic state, it's a constitutional state, you have to engage people and let them be part of this decision or that decision. They cannot impose, because the Constitution of South Africa is clear: freedom of association and freedom of expression. And the government is hoping that they will find one another. Not only that, I think even the sports fraternity, I mean the stadiums, we know that many people go to these stadiums to watch the soccer match. I think they also have to engage the schools. There's a lot that needs to be done, because this issue of getting numbers every day of this virus is going to continue. The numbers are going to go up. But how do you ensure that it doesn't reach a proportion where you don't manage it or you are not able to address it? But also to ensure that those who are affected, they get what they are supposed to get. They are being followed up, they are being quarantined, self-quarantined, and at the end of the day, we must, as a country, avoid in all cost that we have deaths.
All right, Sophie Mokoena, thank you very much. That's Sophie Mokoena joining us from Polokwane in Limpopo. There were, of course, the South Africans are expected to arrive tomorrow from Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus in China. Of course, we'll keep touching base with Sophie Mokoena and Criselda Lewis, who's also there in Limpopo.